Welcome to episode 1 of C3 Crystals, Cauldrons, and Cocktails. I am River Kane.
And I'm Wren Graves.
And we are really excited to start this podcast for you all. To start off, we thought we'd begin with just a little bit about what witchcraft is exactly. Witchcraft is a really broad term, and it varies from culture to culture and from society to society, which makes it really difficult to actually define. Plus, I think it's kind of personal. Different witches have different thoughts about what a witch is. Mm-hmm. What is interesting to me is that the concept of witchcraft is in virtually every culture in the world, both primitive and highly advanced. I think that's pretty cool. Mm-hmm. It isn't all about fun and games. I think it's become popular these days to be a witch. That's not what witchcraft is necessarily about. Magic comes with a price. You need to think and be careful when you delve into witchcraft, I think.
I agree with you. I have a quote. It's from a website. It's called History Extra, and it was like a little blurb about the history of witches, and it had a quote in there, and it said, "Witches are everywhere," and I just love that because they're in books, they're in tales, stories, fantasy, they're in everything,
and they have been for thousands of years,
for a long time.
Yeah,
and it's very fascinating. And in each story and fantasy that they're in, they're each depicted in a different way. And that's what I love about it. And I also...
And that's okay.
Yeah, it is okay. It's also like they're evil witches. And sometimes that's not the best way because most people pick up on, oh, witches are evil. But we also have like shows and stories where they aren't evil, they're good. And so it's kind of just like you pick and choose what you believe if you don't know the history.
I forgot that I was going to tell everybody about whatever cocktails we're drinking.
Oh, yeah.
I think on every episode, we're going to have cocktails. Some might be the same that we've had before, but today I am drinking a grapefruit margarita.
Yeah, I'm not that fun today. I am just drinking a Zivia. It's basically a carbonated water with some stevia in it.
Okay. A little bit of flavor.
Yeah, it's grape. It's grape.
The thing about cocktails to me is that it's almost potion working. I think that there are, what do you call them? Bartenders. The bartenders, there's an actually better word for bartender than bartender. A mixologist, I think is what it is. They are practically mixing potions. And I'm really excited because I just bought a book and I'll have to post the information about it so you all can buy it too if you want to. It's called Witchcraft Cocktails, 70 Seasonal Drinks Infused with Magic and Ritual. It's by Julia Helena Hadas, Hadas, Hadas maybe. And it's a beautiful book. I'll have to take a picture of it so that you all can find her and buy the book too. And it's got cocktails all the way through, some that correspond to the different Sabbats that we might celebrate. And she talks about them being potions. And so I'm really excited that our podcast is going to deal with potions as well. So moving on, I said it's not fun and games, and that is kind of fun and games there. The mixology potion making is kind of fun. But it does seem like people nowadays are becoming more aware of the energies that are around us. And I'm thinking maybe it's because of COVID. We were all kind of forced into seclusion. And I think people became more aware of their surroundings. They had to slow down. They weren't the hustle bustle of get to work, go to work, zoom, zoom, zoom. There's a lot of people. My husband is actually in the plant business, and a lot of people were at home working in their gardens and planting and landscaping. And that got a lot of people back to their roots. And I feel like that may be why people have become so aware of the magic and energies around them, is this change in realization of what's around us.
I would agree to disagree.
Okay.
Because I feel like I would agree because COVID has slowed people down. We've been at home. We are able to assess like our daily lives without being the hustle bustle, go, go, go. So I do agree with that, but I don't agree with the fact that like people are just finding this out about themselves, or they're just like realizing that they have these energies. Because as a person who has been at home due to COVID, yeah, sure, of course, I've been more into like crystals and more into everything, but I've always known that I love that stuff. I've always known that it's been a part of me. So I would agree to disagree on that.
I think it's more the fun and games end of things. It's why it's becoming such a quote trend. I think those of us that are witches know we're witches. We've always known we're witches.
Yeah.
It's not something that you just decide to do one day. I'm not saying that you can't learn witchcraft. I just think there's a lot of us out there that have always had that awareness, like you're talking about. But I think that people being in seclusion have become aware of feelings and energies that they had never been aware of before. There are some people that will never feel it.
And I guess you're right. I kind of took it from where I was coming from. I agreed to disagree from what I felt like my life. But you're right. There are other people.
I like that. I like what you said.
Yeah.
And I think it's becoming kind of a fad too. It's like nerds used to be a really bad connotation. If you were a nerd, no one wanted to associate with you. And nowadays nerds are cool. They're the cool ones. They're the smart ones. They're the computer hackers. They're associated with more cool things. And I think witchcraft is becoming that way too, by some people who think that it's the cool thing to do. And I don't know that those people are necessarily witches or are going to, I think everybody has the potential to be a witch. You just have to be aware of the energies around you. And it takes, that's simplistic.
No, I agree with that. And I was kind of going to derail from that. And I'm wondering, since it was such a huge spike to execute witch hunt for these witches, and I'm kind of curious as to if that's going to happen again. I know that we're in like a more modern era, but it's also something that people are scared of because they don't understand it. They're not educated on it and they don't understand it fully. And
that's true.
I'm curious.
I think you're right. We have learned in the last year how close-minded some people still are. The prejudice is still against gay people and this far right wing that is so against any kind of change. But I do think that change is here. There are more gay people comfortable coming out. There are more witches comfortable coming out. But you're right. I'm curious because that reminds me of the Charmed episode where they went into the future and Phoebe was going to be burned at the stake, I think, because of how they used the magic. I think it was the point was you don't want to misuse magic. And because that can lead to fear.
That's just like a really big thing that's been on my mind, because you have a whole ton of people. I wouldn't say a lot because there is still that stigma around being a witch and calling yourself a witch or saying you practice magic or anything, like whatever you call yourself. There's still this stigma around it. And I think that it's becoming bigger and more well known. That's why it's kind of like a trend to hop on right now. But as soon as that trend dies out, I'm curious to see where we end up, like in society's stance.
I hope they don't come hunt us down because we're going to be all over social media. They can track us down pretty easy.
Yeah.
But it is a scary thought. I don't mean to make light of it. You're right that it is scary. I do want to also say that witches can be men or women. There are some stereotypes out there that, it's if you're a witch, you're a woman. To be a man, you have to be called a warlock or whatever. I don't agree with that.
I don't agree with that either. Even in some of my research, when all the witch hunt was going down from the 1400s to the 1700s, there were still men thrown in the mix, but not as many because it was seen as women were the witches. But actually, more in statistics, 1 in every 5 witches, they were male during those times. But you don't hear about that because it was always the woman's the witch because of everything going on with like women and men in the society that they were in those times.
Yes, that is very interesting. Did you watch Sabrina, the Teenage Witch, the new one?
Yeah, I did.
Have you finished it all the way through?
Yes.
So in that one, I kind of like how, and I don't think this is a spoiler alert for anybody that hasn't watched it. I kind of liked how in the beginning it was male dominated. Their coven was led by a male. It was all male dominated. And as that series progressed, it became more female dominated, which I'm not saying that female domination is the right way to go either. It was a neat shift to go from that traditional male oriented thought process of who has to lead and be in charge to female, and that anybody, male and female, can be included.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I didn't notice it while I was watching it, but now that you bring it up, I do notice that, and that is very interesting. I guess I didn't like notice it on a like that type of level. It was probably in my subconscious that I noticed it. I didn't notice that.
It's interesting. I am a writer as well, so I do notice that kind of thing, the arcs of characters and the arcs of plot lines and that kind of thing. So what is magic? That also is something that is defined in so many different ways. Mm-hmm. I personally believe it has to do with intent, will, and energy. Mm-hmm. I think all of those have varying definitions too. You know, what is intent? Whose intent? Is it yours, the caster's intent? Is it the intent of the mother goddess or whatever it is that you use to cast your spell? What is intent? Whose intent? Is it the group intent? If you're in a coven, is it the intent of the group? And the same with will. Whose will? Is it divine will? Is it your will? Whose will are we using to cast this spell, so to speak? It's not always just spells that you're casting when you're talking about magic. And then energy, it's to me, it's kind of like a magical presence. It's something that I just feel around me. You can feel, and I think everybody, even people who don't and would never consider themselves witches, when you walk into a room, you can feel the energy in that room. Sometimes it's a somber energy. Sometimes it is strong, happy energy. It's like the vibe, I guess some people call it. There's energy everywhere.
That's what I was going to say. I was going to say, I don't necessarily say energy when I walk into a room, but I always say, oh, the vibe is off, or there's like a shift in like vibes in the room. I guess it's like
and you can feel that. Yeah. You can feel that. And I think anybody can feel it if they're paying attention to it and are open to it. Does magic, can it really cause an effect in reality? Can it cause a change in reality? And science can come into this. Magic may be something that it may be scientific and something that we don't know yet. Mm-hmm. And some of us just have the ability for whatever reason to connect to it for some reason.
Yeah.
It might be scientific. We just don't know yet.
Yeah, I like to think of magic and energies as like from a scientific standpoint, because coming from a scientist, I love to think about light waves and how we see, because it's visible light. We only have a small sliver of visible light that we can see. Everything else is not visible to the human eye. So there could be so much more just in our living room that we can't see. And same with sound waves. There's so much going on that we can't hear, but it's still going on. And I like to think about magic in that way.
I think that's a great way to describe it. I love that it's beyond what we're capable of perceiving without practice, which is kind of why they call it practicing magic, because it does take practice and it does take skill. You know, that story, have you ever heard of that story about the monks that were able to use their will and intent to slow down their heart rate to the point where people think they're dead?
Yes.
That to me is magic. That and it's also scientific,
Mhm.
but it was their will and intent, and that did affect reality. That affects their bodies to the point where they could slow their heartbeat down and still be alive. It was a meditative state that I think, a trance that they put themselves in. And I think that fits into the definition of magic. And so is it really so far-fetched to go beyond that and say, the mind can affect other things as well?
Mhm.
I think so. I mean, I think everybody has stories about, I thought of this and it came true, or, I wanted my friend to get better. It's along the line of prayers, which a lot of people think of. I kind of think prayer is magic to an
I've never
extent.
connected it like that, because prayer even is in itself an intent,
Mm-hmm.
and I've never thought of it like that. So you don't know if whatever the person was praying to, if it was that type of energy source, or if it was the energy source coming from their intent alone, or maybe a combination.
Was it divine will? Was it,
Yeah. Yeah,
so,
that's very
so
interesting.
is witchcraft religious? Well, not necessarily. There are religions that use witchcraft, like the Wiccan religion.
Hmm.
That's an actual religion. There's a difference between witchcraft and religion. There are Satanists out there that might practice witchcraft, or they might not. There are Satanists that don't practice witchcraft, but that's the religious side of it. But witchcraft itself doesn't have to necessarily be religious. A lot of people talk about the moon goddess and the Gaia, the Mother Earth. And I am more inclined to feel the energies of everything. I don't know that there's a specific entity that controls everything, but I can feel the energies.
Hmm.
And energy is just my term for it. I don't know what everybody else's terms are. I would love to
Yeah.
hear what you all call it and how you all think about what magic is.
Hmm.
I mean, we're certainly not here saying we really don't know anything. That's what got us started on this podcast, is that we would go down that what if road. Well, what if it's this? And we're just fascinated by it. And we're not saying we're right. We're not saying our ideas are right. There are going to be ideas that you guys have that hopefully you will share with us, that we're going to, have the mind explosion, and we're going to go, oh, wow, I never thought of that. How cool is that? That's brilliant.
Yeah.
So I look forward to that. I can't wait to hear from all of you guys as to what you think and what your thoughts are on magic, and what stories you have about your attempts to use magic.
Yeah. Let me interject and say I have some history on witches. More importantly, just like the beginning of witches, and we will definitely get more into detail about the history for sure. But just some like quick information that I have is kind of an info dump, but I think it's important to know. Just that the witch hunt started in 1482 and it lasted generally about around 1782 across Europe. And most women were accused of witchcraft and executed. So around 100,000 people across Europe were accused. And of that,
did you know that even though we connotate burning witches at the stake, that's not the way that they were commonly killed?
they were hanged.
Correct.
Yes. And I don't actually have that in my notes, but I should have, because I did read that. But around the 100,000 people across Europe who were accused, 40 to 50,000 were actually executed.
Damn, that's like half of them.
That's half.
That's terrible.
It's crazy. And most of them, I want to say most of them, I guess we'll never know how many of them were actually witches and how many were actually innocent and just lost to the cause because they couldn't prove.
I would say most were innocent, because those of us that are witches, well, it's hard to say. And I didn't live in that time period.
Yeah.
So I'm really feeling my cocktail, y'all. But I think that the witches would have been smart enough to keep their mouths shut.
But that's
But
the thing. I watched a small documentary, a small blurb of the documentary from the History Channel about witches and the times when they were being ground up to be executed. Everybody was put under massive torture that you couldn't even imagine.
Mm.
They had I don't even have like the correct terms, but I remember seeing this chair just full of spikes and they made them like sit on it. They would put weights on their bodies. So even if you were innocent, you would say anything to make that stop. So of course you'd say, of course I'm a witch.
That's why torture doesn't work,
Yeah.
because you will say anything. I mean,
Yeah, it's crazy. And hearing those stories, it was just awful. And then it came up to be like, okay, so if you're a witch, who are you working with? Who are your conspirators? Like, who are you doing this witchcraft with? And then
and you
of
just
course,
start
yeah,
names.
you just name your neighbor, you name your cat, you name your dog, everything, because you want the torture to stop. And that's really where all like this amount of people came from, like 100,000 people across Europe. And in that time, that was a lot of people. I mean, it's still a lot of people, but
and I bet if you're the one accusing someone, then they're not looking at you.
yeah.
So better to be the one accusing someone to keep the suspicion off of you.
Yeah, for sure. And I have like the question, why? And why so many innocents? And I liked the website that I chose, and it really summed it up. And we will obviously go into more detail, but this sentence, this phrase really summed it up. And it was, in these times, witches were seen as vile and aggressive beings that look to seek harm and disrupt the divine order of things.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why this whole witch hunt happened, was because these witches were disrupting order of society, of everything, because what they were doing wasn't the norm, and it was a threat.
I say that, I wouldn't be burned at the stake or hanged or whatever because I would be smart enough to keep quiet. I don't have that personality, so I would probably be one of the first ones hanged. It bothers me.
Yeah.
I push back. I'm a pusher backer.
Yeah, it's hard to say, because when you're put under that extreme pain, what you'll say. I would like to say I'm a demented person because when my mom spanked me for getting in trouble when I was younger, I would laugh because I didn't know how to react, because I thought it was funny that she was doing that. And
so you would be the one tortured, laughing maniacally, and they'd be going, she's definitely a witch.
So of course I would be burned at the stake or hanged or whatever, because obviously my laughing is a coping mechanism for whatever I'm going through.
I wonder how they came up. I wonder why it's such prevalent in all of our minds that witches were burned at the stake.
Because it was very, I read a blurb, correct me if I'm wrong, that they started burning witches at the stake in Spain because they thought that if nothing was left but ashes of the witch, they couldn't resurrect, they couldn't come back, their powers were completely obliterated. Their being was no longer.
I wonder if they knew to mix salt in with the ashes to keep that from happening.
I didn't read anything about salt, but it also did say that in the documentary I watched.
Very interesting.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, the burning wasn't until later, but most of
them
were
hanged them. Well, a lot of them, if I remember, one of the ways to determine that you were a witch was something about drowning.
Yes, I also saw that.
What was that?
If you sunk, like they would bind your hands and your feet together and they throw you in the water. And if you sunk, you were a witch. And so then therefore you would die. But if you floated, you weren't a witch, but they would still let you die. You would still drown.
But you still died. You still drowned.
But you died with that clear title of your name.
What a shame she wasn't a witch. Let's move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Which is
That's
awful.
terrible.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that, we talk about men also being witches, and I'm not here to say that that's wrong, but there is something about, and I think a lot of men would agree with this in today's world, that there is power in a group of women because men do, well, historically, I'm not saying now, historically, men have tried to separate the women because we do have power together. And
Yeah, I think it's hard to talk about that and not offend anybody.
I mean, and I think that if you're talking about offending people, witchcraft is
Very,
offensive
yes.
to a lot of people.
Yeah, it's just
My
men have
grandmother would be mortified. My dad has like a sixth sense.
Mhm.
He has shown witchy vibes for as long as I can remember, but he would be mortified for me to say that I think he's a witch, but I think he is. He just doesn't have any idea that he is.
Mhm. Yeah, and I feel like that's the case with a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
because they just think of it as like, oh, that's something normal that happens to them. Like I get a
Well,
lot of,
plus they have the connotation of witches being bad.
yeah. And so if like take for example, like I get a lot of deja vu and I get
Mm-hmm.
a lot of like I can really read the vibes, as I would say, or energies of a house or a room or of people really, really well. But I've just always thought I could just do that. I just thought it was normal. And
And
it's
you
not
don't call
normal.
that energy?
No, I
That's so interesting to me because that's how to me, it's energy.
I
Even
guess
an aura is energy.
I never looked at it like that. I just always said like when I was growing up, for example, when I was growing up, down the street, there were these two boys, and I kind of grew up with them. And there was a loose dog one day, and I was going around the neighborhood before I took the dog to a shelter, and I was knocking on these neighbors' doors and saying, "Is this your dog?" Like, no, because it didn't have a collar. And I opened the door, and this guy with the two boys opened the door, and it was just a sick vibe, a
Mm-hmm.
sick, disgusting vibe I got off of him. And I knew I had to leave. I had to get off the porch no matter what I did.
Wow.
To this day, I have no idea. I think that they're still living there, but who
That's
knows?
crazy.
But it's like that type of
See,
feeling.
and people, I think, write off their vibes. That they think they're too quick to dismiss that feeling. You've
Mhm.
got to listen to your gut.
Yeah, and
I think that is witchcraft. That is something that gut feeling is your intuition, which I think intuition is a whole lot of witchcraft.
yeah.
Listen to that inner gut.
I like that. And I could spiral on conspiracy theories about what your gut feeling is. My
Mm-hmm.
favorite is it's your future self telling you something's wrong. I love that one.
Interesting.
I could spiral.
I had I read somewhere, and I'm a very forgetful person. So I read somewhere that the reason you forget why you've walked into a room is because you walk through a ghost and they've eaten they eat your thoughts. They live off thoughts.
Wow.
And so when you walk into a room and you're like, crap, why did I come here? What was I up here for? That's why, because you've stepped through the essence of a ghost and they eat off of your thoughts.
I like that idea. I just sort of chalk that up to like we're in a simulation and the person who's controlling my sim just like cleared out what I was doing.
You're one of the Matrix people.
Yeah, like they were like, "Oh, I'm gonna have her go get a cup of water," and then they were like, "But no
Never
water
mind.
anymore." And then I walk into the kitchen, I'm like, "Why am I here?"
I love that. That's pretty great.
That's how I think of it, but I don't believe that. I just like to theorize.
Well, I don't
lot.
I don't want to write anything.
Yeah.
Because we don't know.
Yeah.
That's why I love to have these conversations with you. I'm so glad that I found you, Wren, because I think these things, but now I've got a kindred soul to talk to about them.
Yeah.
And I mean that I don't know what is true. I don't know if maybe we really do walk through a ghost and that's what we don't know.
Yeah. We have no idea, and that's what's so fun. I love it.
Me too.
I do like to say like, oh, I believe this, but I really don't. I just really love talking about it.
Me too.
And I guess that's why we're here. We love talking about this
Yes,
stuff, and it's just fun.
it is fun. I don't think witchcraft itself is either good or bad. I
Mhm.
think that goes back to the intent of the caster.
Yeah, it goes back to the soul of the person that is using the magic. It
Hmm.
goes back down to personality, person, and who the person is. It's not the magic itself.
And there is the rule of three, which some forms of witchcraft believe in and some forms don't, where anything that you do is going to come back to you threefold.
Hmm.
There are people who do want to do dark things with magic, and they don't necessarily believe in that threefold law. Not all the forms of witchcraft and the users of witchcraft believe that.
Hmm.
But I do think it's subjective also as to what is good and what's bad.
Yeah, I agree with that. It is subjective because everybody's different.
Hmm.
And who's to say one thing is good versus bad, especially with magic and rules where there aren't really rules. You
Yeah.
just make it up as you go along and what's pertaining to you and how you view everything.
Yeah, I don't think there are any rules, so to speak, unless you're a part of a religion that has rules, like the Wiccan religion. They have their own set of rules. If you're in a coven, your coven might, as a group, come up with rules that you want to govern your coven. And those are the rules that matter to that particular group or that particular person. But overall, there aren't any rules. I don't ever want to kill anybody. I don't ever want to hurt anybody. It's not going to be my intent. If that ability's out there and you have that ability, I'm not here to judge. It's something I would never want to do.
Hmm. And there are people out there that would,
Hmm.
because they're like, you can take it and you can look at it and be like, society wise, we have murderers. Society wise, we have the holy, divine people that never do anything wrong.
Hmm.
So I don't see why that wouldn't go to magic and witchcraft as well. You
Hmm.
can have many different types of people. You can have many different types of witches and what
Oh,
type
that's a
of
good point.
magic.
That's a great point.
Hmm.
Witchcraft is only limited by the people that use it.
Yeah. So if, let's
That's
say, a murderer practices witchcraft, they might entail a murder through magic. That's not what other people would do, but I could see where that would happen. And who's to say that that's magic's fault?
Yeah, that reminds me. I mean, there's so many horror movies out there, which I love horror movies. I am a big fan of horror movies. I was lucky this year. My husband let me, I don't say let me, it's not like that, but he was kind enough to indulge me. Let's put it that way. I watched horror movies every day of October,
Hmm.
at least one every day.
Hmm.
I just love them. And he thinks they're okay. So he indulged me and allowed me to enjoy that. But, horror movies always talk about witchcraft being evil, leading
Hmm.
down the path of evil. Some are
Yeah.
outright evil, like dealing with demons. Some are trickster type magic. Like, do you remember the movie Open Graves with Eliza Dushku?
Yes, I do.
I love that movie. And it's more trickster magic. It was magic, but and I don't want to ruin it for anybody. It's old enough. Everybody who wants to see it should have seen it by now, but that was kind of trickster magic. And I absolutely love that movie.
Hmm.
And then there's TV shows like Charmed, where the witches were the good guys.
Hmm. And I'll just go ahead and explain. Off that topic, I do have some witch stories and shows written down where
Okay.
they're each different, but it shows how they use magic in completely different ways.
Okay.
So there's the Sanderson sisters from Hocus Pocus
Yeah.
that we all love, but they were evil in
They
a
eat
way.
children.
Yeah. And then you also have the Wicked Witch of the West and Glinda the Good Witch and Wizard of Oz. And that portrays a good witch and a bad witch. But of course, the bad witch was green with warts and
I know, right?
Yeah. And you have Ursula from The Little Mermaid. Of course, she was evil. She stole Ariel's voice and everything. But then you also have witches like Bonnie in The Vampire Diaries, where she's she's very powerful, but she doesn't use her magic mostly for evil intent. She uses it mostly for good to help her friends. You have Maleficent.
Which there's two with Maleficent. The original Disney movie with Maleficent where she was the evil, and then the new one where she's just misunderstood.
Yeah. Which I love those two. I love those two perceptions. It's very intriguing and interesting to look at. But also you have one of my favorite, I guess you could say like witch personas, Marie Laveau from American Horror Story. She was the voodoo queen or witch of the series, and her power and how everything just like involved like the magic and the voodoo and everything, and I just loved it.
We'll have to do episodes on the different types of witchcraft that's out there, because voodoo is interesting.
Yes.
You have Native American magic, skinwalkers. We'll have to do episodes on all of those things. I think that's a great idea.
Yes, and I could definitely spiral down a really fun conversation.
Me too.
I always do. But the list goes on. Like the Charm Sisters, you have the old hag and Hansel and Gretel.
Yeah, she ate children too. You know, there is a common thread in old folk tales where witches eat children. And I don't know why. I'll have to do some research on that and see if I can figure out why that is connotated with witches. That's interesting. I like all of those. There's so much more, like Supernatural. In Supernatural, which I love that TV series, the witches were generally bad. Dean hated them. You know, they used the hex bags and that kind of thing. So yeah, witches are portrayed in a wide variety of ways. So basically, the way a witch practices witchcraft is a personal thing. Yes. And, you know, there are independent witches that never practice with anybody else, never ever come out of the closet. They, you know, there are witches that prefer a coven. There is power in numbers. I do believe that the energy that you can get from members of a coven is stronger than individual magic by itself. I mean, at some point we'll talk about familiars too, and how those might help an individual witch so that they don't necessarily need a coven. And then covens themselves, there's different kinds of covens. Think of the hippie love, no rules coven to the actual formal rituals. You wear the robes and chant type covens.
Yeah, I feel like I'd be a part of the hippie coven.
I can see that. I can see that. There's also different tools that witches use in their practice. You know, there's the athame, there's bells, there's all kinds of tools. And I think we'll do episodes on these different tools and talking about how they can help the use of magic and what they're thought to have done in the past. We both are really interested in the history of witchcraft. And so there will be a lot of stories about that to come out too. And we're really excited to delve into those. I did come across, well, actually, my husband sent me this article about women in the beer industry and how it relates to witchcraft, which is so fascinating to me. He sent me this. I think it was on Reddit. He's a big Reddit reader. And up until the 1500s, brewing beer was primarily women's work. And, you know, a lot of the iconography that we associate with witches today, from the pointy hat to the broom, came from the connection to female brewers,
Really?
which I found to be fascinating. Oh, I should say the author of this article is Lakin Brooks. When she wrote this, well, let's see, it was March 5th, 2021 that she wrote it. So she is a doctoral student of English at the University of Florida. Fascinating article. It was on The Conversation is where he got this article from. And it was written March 5th, 2021. And, humans have been drinking beer for almost 7,000 years. And the original brewers were women. From the Vikings to the Egyptians, women were the ones that brewed the beer, both for religious ceremonies and for the practical calorie-rich beverage to have at home.
Interesting.
Which my background is, in my ancestry, I have German blood. And beer was a common drink just to drink. There was no, you can't have that, you're under 18 or whatever the rule might be. It was like this article says, it was calories that you're trying to get into the people to help them live and survive and have the energy that they needed to do the work that they needed to do.
Yeah, I could see that.
Yeah. And let's see. So if you traveled back to time into the Middle Ages or the Renaissance time, and you went to the market, you would see women wearing these tall, pointy hats, standing around these big cauldrons where they're brewing this beer. So that's where a lot of those icons come from, is from beer brewing. And then it took a turn when the religious movement moved in around the 16th century, and they started having stricter gender norms at that point. And they started to condemn witchcraft. And this article says that male brewers saw that as an opportunity to reduce their competition in the beer trade. Some accused women brewers of being witches, using their cauldrons to brew up magic potions instead of booze. And then over time, it became more and more dangerous for women to sell the beer because they would be misidentified as witches. And to me, that's just fascinating, because back then, of course, you could not just get persecuted for it, but you would be put to death for it.
Yeah.
And
upsetting.
It is. And they were ostracized and imprisoned and killed. And some of these men apparently didn't really believe that they were witches. They were doing it for economic reasons, to take over the market.
That's just gross.
Isn't that fascinating?
I mean, it's very interesting, because wouldn't you say nowadays, but there are certain types of Joes out there that would do that, and they wouldn't mind getting their competition killed if it meant they were going to be the top.
Well, they made it illegal in some towns for women to actually brew beer back in the 1500s, like Chester, England. Mm-hmm. And the thought process came about that if women weren't brewing, they would have more time to clean the house and cook our food and raise our babies. And so to the point where they actually made it illegal. And one of their reasons for condoning this was, well, we don't want these women to grow up spinsters.
If you guys can hear my eyes rattle in my
I was going to say, yeah.
I'm just rolling my eyes so hard. That is the most annoying thing that I could hear.
And today, men still dominate the beer industry. The top 10 beer companies in the world are headed by male CEOs and have mostly male board members.
I'm curious, is it a lineage thing? Because if it was passed down from father to son over generations, I wonder if you could track back to when, like, the heritage of like
where the men took it over from the women. I'm curious.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. It says that, and think about the beer ads, the advertisements that we watch in the Super Bowl. They're geared towards men. Mm-hmm. It's not just men that like beer.
No, everyone. Anyone.
I like cocktails better than beer, but I do drink beer.
Yeah, I'm not a beer person. Yeah, just to preface, I'm sensitive, so whatever you say without judgment.
Oh, I'm not sensitive.
I'm sensitive.
Well, heck, I'm a writer. So, if I were sensitive, I would be in big trouble. So, anyway, I thought that was an interesting story. And I do love it that my husband sent it to me because, he's not a witch. I don't even know that he believes in witchcraft. But he accepts my trip down this path and is very supportive of me, including supporting this podcast. This takes time from his world too, where I've got a real job that earns me money. I've got hobbies like my writing that doesn't earn me money yet. I've got this podcast, which, takes up time, and he is more than willing to support me, as is your husband. So
yes.
we have some good ones.
Yes. My husband was the one who actually thought of this whole idea.
It was his idea.
Yeah. And he's still a little, I'm not going to say uncomfortable, but he's still like teetering on that line of like witchcraft. He still has the stereotypes in his head. And then there's me, and he's like, well, she's not the stereotype, so what the heck is going on? So he's still warming up to the idea, but I'm just waiting for the day for him to find a rock or something and him bring it home and be like, I thought you'd like this. Like, I'm just waiting for it.
I love it. Well, we do love rocks and crystals. It's,
Yeah, but the one he would bring me is like a piece of
gravel.
like concrete that came off the sidewalk, and he thought it looked cool.
But that's so sweet, though.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the day.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how long we've been talking, but we can wrap it up for now. We've got so much to talk about. We could go down rabbit holes and keep you all here for hours and hours.
Yes.
But for now, check out our website at www.c3witchypodcast.com. You can find our episodes there and links to our social media. We have Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook so far. Most are under the @C3 Witchy Podcast. So you can look for us there. I do try, both of us actually try to post on our social media fairly often. Not just information about our podcast, but cute little memes and, snippets of information, that kind of thing. You can email us through our website. There's a place to do that. If you would like to support us, which we would love for you to support us, this does take time, money, and effort. You can support us at our Patreon. It's www.patreon.com/C3 Witchy Podcast. Let us know what topics you want us to talk about, what you think about what we have talked about. If you think we're full of crap, tell us that too. Well, nicely, because
nicely
hurt Wren's feelings. Pretty much anything you want to share, we want to hear it. So
yes, please, anything you want to say. I would love the feedback. I love to be informed. I love to enhance my learning on any type of topic, especially this topic. So please let us know if there's anything we said wrong, if anything we got wrong, we will correct it. Please feel free to let us know about anything.
And we'll give you credit for it, of course.
Yes.
So come listen to us on Friday nights at midnight.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.